All right, let's look now at an empirical formula type calculation. So remember, empirical formula is the smallest ratio that those elements appear in a compound. So if we have a question like this, what is the empirical formula of a compound with a percent composition of 27.29% carbon and 72.71% oxygen? So remember that the percent is the part out of the whole. So if something has 27.29% carbon, that means out of every 100 grams of compound, 27.29 of those grams are carbon, and out of every 100 grams of the compound, 72.71 of those grams are oxygen. So remember, that's what our percent composition tells us. So to do a problem like this, the first thing we need to do is find out how many moles of each we have. So we're going to assume we have 100 grams, so that tells us we have 27.29 grams of carbon. And we also know then that we have 72.71 grams of oxygen. So if we remember our mole map, if we have grams of something, we can go to moles of whatever element that is. And we do that using our periodic table. So if we look at our periodic table for carbon, element number 6, we know that 1 mole of carbon weighs 12.01 grams. So we can say that 1 mole of carbon is the same as 12.01 grams of carbon. Right, and now our grams of carbon are going to cancel, and it's going to leave us with moles of carbon. Now we want to convert our 27.17 grams of oxygen to moles of oxygen, so we need to know how much 1 mole of oxygen weighs. And if we go to our periodic table and look at element number 8, it's 16.00 grams of oxygen weigh the same as 1 mole. So if we do our calculations, then this should tell us we have about 2.27 moles of carbon, and we have 4.54 moles of oxygen. So to find the empirical formula, we know that for every 4.54 moles of oxygen, we have 2.2 moles of carbon. What we do is divide both of these moles by the smaller of the two numbers. So we're going to take 2.27 and divide it by 2.27, and that will equal 1. And then we're going to take 5.54 and divide it by 2.27, and that will equal 2. So that tells us for every 1 mole of carbon, we have 2 moles of oxygen in this case. All right, so we have 1 carbon for every 2 oxygen, so our empirical formula would be CO2. So again, this is carbon and this is oxygen, so 1 carbon and 2 oxygens. So that's a pretty simple case because there's only two elements in that compound, but you could do it for a compound of even larger number of elements.